gente, yo voy a pasar al día número uno. So we're going to do day one for the Black History Challenge today, or the Black History Trivia Contest / info / whatever you want to call it. That's what we're doing for the entire month of February. So y'all might have seen my video earlier. It says that I'm going to be talking about some Black history facts as it relates to language. And today, this would be your first post for that. So let's talk a little bit about los Moros, okay? So I talked a little bit about the Moors on Facebook, and there's a couple of things that I want to add over here. So the Moors actually occupied Spain for 800 years. So there was the North Africans. They came from North Africa, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, entered right into Spain, took over in 711 AD, and decided that they were just going to stay there for 800 years. And in the process of being there for 800 years, a lot of stuff happened. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of wordplay for some of you all that might be a little bit advanced in your Spanish and this, that, and the other. So there is a word in Spanish, morra, la morra. La morra means blackberry. And it was given that name for a couple of reasons. One, because los Moros, the Moors that came over. And two, because of the ways that they kind of described what their hair looked like in their opinion. So they called the blackberry the morra because it reminded them of the Moors in terms of their appearance by skin color and by hair. So when you eat a morra, a blackberry, that's just thank the Moors for that. So that's one little vocabulary thing that I'm just going to toss in there for y'all that I didn't necessarily give all the other folks in public. But let's go on to this history for a little bit because I want to make sure that y'all get it. So in 711 AD, Tariq ibn Ziyad came over with his army into Spain, and they conquered and occupied Spain for 800 years. While they were there, what they did was they brought 70 public libraries. They built and established 70 public libraries throughout the country, and they also brought universal education. Universal education, wow. Universal education for all. We do that in public school, but imagine if college was universal. That's a whole other college debt trauma in and of itself. But anyway, yes, so they brought universal education over from what they were doing in North Africa. Now there's a couple of things that we need to peep with this. So 711 AD, that is really important. 711 AD. This is before they entered onto the continent. This is before they came onto the continent. This is right after the fall, not too far after the fall of the Roman Empire. So this is the timing that we're thinking about here. So this group, this army, came into Spain and brought these systems with them prior to colonialization. Now, if you think about the way that they set up our history and the way that they help us to understand things, they give us this impression that we had nothing until they got to the continent, correct? But if we look at the history of the Moors, we can know that's not even including Timbuktu, Egypt, Kush, all of that stuff. But just looking at the Moors, we know that that's not true. We know that we had the systems already in place, and they essentially just kind of borrowed them. Because peep this also happened. In 711 AD, they come in there. They were in there for 800 years. That means they all up and through. Black folks all up and through Spain, essentially. That's what we got. Black folks all up and through Spain for 800 years. And during their occupation is when the Renaissance happened. Y'all know the Renaissance. The painters started changing their scope. They shifted their focus away from medieval religion onto just looking at landscapes, looking at people. All of this stuff started to happen. There's this resurgence of creativity that came while the Moors were occupying Spain. There was this resurgence of enlightened thinking and this need to be able to pontificate and think about things in a totally different way during Moorish occupation. They did not have public libraries prior to Moorish occupation, and then all of a sudden we got libraries popping up everywhere. They did not have universal education or universities prior to Moorish occupation, and then all of a sudden here they go popping up, springing up. So that means that there's a way in which our influence as Black people transcends the history that we're given. When we do world history, when we do European history in high school, a lot of times they give us, they might talk a little bit about medieval times, and they act as though the Renaissance was a light bulb moment for Europe, but it really wasn't a light bulb moment. If the Moors were there for 800 years, that means from 711, when they were all doing still kind of off in the Iron Age kind of what they called their paganistic time, if they were still in that when the Moors got there in 711, and in 711 they're starting to build libraries, they're starting to build education systems and all of this, that, and the other, that means that it wasn't a light bulb moment. They looked at Spain and saw all these Black folks in Spain doing these things, and they're like, oh wait, hold on, let us get this intel so that we can try to create this for ourselves. And then they also, in strategy, because this is how white supremacy works, in their strategy, and there's more of us than them, so we can create this narrative that this started somewhere else. This whole thing with the Medicis and all of this, that, and the other, yes, the Medicis were powerful. I'm not going to take that away from them. The Medicis was running Italy for real. But the funding that they were giving to the artists, to the thinkers, and this, that, and the other, those thinkers did not just pop out of nowhere. Those thinkers were in Spain. And then from Spain, they came back to Italy with the stuff that they had learned from sitting at the feet of the Moors in order to be able to get what they wanted to get. There's a way in which, because the Moors were there for so long, that is probably a lot like how it is here in the United States. I bet you if we was to do some for real DNA tests, there'd be a whole lot of folks white presenting in Spain that are gonna find out they got more Black blood than they bargained for, because it's the same sort of thing. And I also want you to think about what this means in terms of influence. So we know that as Black folks, we've been in the United States for about 400 years. On record for 400 years. And in that time, we've gotten influences for them. We've given them a lot of stuff, right? We've given the United States a lot of stuff. We've given them a lot of our intellect. We've given them a lot of our creativity. We've given them a lot of our words. We've given them a lot of our religious practices. So there are a lot of the rites and rituals that we do over here in the United States when it comes to even churches. If you were to sit back and take a step back and look at some of the traditional African religions, you'll see some similarities there. That's a whole other story in and of itself. So, and that's after only 400 years. The Moors were in Spain for twice that time. So that means that how they influence the language means a whole lot for us and why we up in here. Because if you think about it, the Moors were there for 800 years. There are 4,000 Spanish words that come from and originate from the Moors. 4,000. Now, the average child knows about 3,500 words, right? The average child about 10, 12 years old, 6, 7 years old knows about 3,500 words. And so add 500 more to that, and then say that is how much influence was on the Spanish language in Spain. So just to give you an idea, I want you to think about, for those of y'all who might have that vocabulary, you might even have a vocabulary list with you. Look at your vocabulary list. And in looking at your vocabulary list, I want you to look at every single vocabulary word you have that starts with the letter A and the letter L. A-L. All of those words are Moorish influence. Every last one of those words, if it starts with an A and has an L as a second letter, that is all African influenced Spanish words that are part of your vocabulary that you're trying to learn. That includes the verbs alquilar, almuerzo, almohada, alfombra. I'm just giving y'all some insight into what these are. So 4,000 of those words. And that's not even including like the one I just gave you in the beginning of the video, mora, the word for blackberry. And the reason why it's called a blackberry is because it reminded the Spaniards, when they saw it, it reminded them of the Moors because of the way that it looked in color and in the way that the hair looked, in imagining what their hair looked like. Look at that. So we're starting our day one of Black History Month talking about the Moors and the Moorish influence, and being able to help you to understand, because I really want you all to get this, being able to understand that even if you want to go bare bones in Hotep about it, I'm anti-Hotep. I'm very much no Teps. But anyway, but if you want to go deep off into looking at it like that, if you want to look at it from a woke perspective, if you want to look at it from an Afrocentric perspective, your choice to choose Spanish as a language that you want to dive into has African linkages to it. There are African linkages to the very language that you are seeking to learn right now. And to think about this just a little bit further, all of these Africanisms that are in language, that are in the Spanish language that came from the country of Spain where the Moors were, and then came over here to what we now know as Latin America and the US, all of that still brought that African influence with them. But yet, when we're in the classroom and when we're sitting in the classroom and we're learning these words and we're learning this understanding, we don't get the Moorish history. They don't tell us about the Black history that is associated with the Spanish language. And I think that's critical for us to be able to just kind of sit in for a second. And I want us to sit in it porque es necesario que necesito saber que hay herencia negra en todo que estamos aprendiendo. There's something Black in everything that we are learning. We just need to know what it is. We need to know how to find it. We need to know how to seek it. And we need to know how to place it within our hearts and souls while we're learning these things, because that's what's going to help us to remember it. So if you think about now, let's get simple about it. You are now in a space that is providing a space for you that is allowing you to learn a language that has African ancestry. Look at that. Mira lo que Dios hace. Mira eso. So that is your Black History Note for today. I'm coming in with more of these for you guys. I'm trying to go sequentially. It's probably going to drift off, but I'm going to try to go in order as best I can. So starting with the Moors, I'm going to give you some a little bit later and a little bit after the Moors, a little bit after them, and a little bit after them. But I know that once I start getting into more contemporary stuff, it's probably going to get a little meshed and melded a little bit. But the goal is to at least give you some of this basic history when it comes to Blacks and language, and Blacks in Spanish language most specifically, but Blacks in language in general. So that's your first note. It's longer than it's typically going to be, but I wanted to make sure y'all have that. Until the next time and the next note, hasta pronto.